Hello there, this is Redjoy, and today we're going to take a new look at the monk and their kits, as well as a possible download that you can try playing as the monk for Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. So the monk is the fighter who fights without weapons. Well, okay, they can fight with some weapons, but they are trained, they're the only class that can actually go into combat with their fists and fight and actually kill with their fists. No other kit or class can do that. If you try attacking with just your fists as a fighter, barbarian, paladin, whatever, you will just knock an opponent out. It will knock them unconscious. So while that might be fun to do for certain classes or builds, that doesn't actually get you any experience points, which I actually think is kind of a short sight. I think that would be kind of a cool thing if you just be like, go into an area, knock out your opponents, take their stuff, and run away and get the experience points of that. I think that'd be kind of cool. But, you know, that's not the way I decided to craft a game, whatever, right? Instead, we get the monk. Now, I love the idea of the monk. I grew up watching superhero movies and Dragon Ball Z and all those shows where it shows the hero fighting with their fists, martial arts, to take out the bad guys. Unfortunately, this iteration of Dungeons and Dragons does not do very well for that class and that kit. There are a lot of limitations to it to make the monk a very challenging class to play. I know that there are people who play as the monk on higher levels, but they do have quite a few things that make them a challenge to play. We're going to talk about them today. The obvious big thing is that monks can't wear any armor, they can't use shields, and they cannot wear helmets. The loss of wearing helmets is devastating to a monk. Not being able to protect their chrome dome leaves them vulnerable to critical attacks and critical hits, which means that if you get a critical hit on yourself, you're going to get double damage against yourself. If you're playing on really high difficulties and you have double damage on, ooh boy, that's a lot of damage. And heaven forbid, if that happens to be a backstab or critical strike used against you, a monk is not going to be in for a good time. They can use weapons. They can become proficient in any weapon style that is similar to a thief. So long swords, short swords, and so on. They cannot use any two-handed weapons. So they can't use bows and they can't use quarterstaves. I think the main point is that they should be using their fists. Their fists go up in level as the monk levels up. By the time you're hitting level 15, you're doing 1d20 damage with your fists. That's pretty good. And plus, you're adding on strength to that, and you're getting an extra half attack per round every 3 levels. So by that time, you should be looking at having a large number of attacks per round. Your fists will later on be considered as magical weapons up to +4, which sounds really great, except for the fact that there are some enemies that are immune to magical weapons unless they're +5. So you're going to run into a little bit of trouble there. So just be aware of that. Keep in mind that you may have to have your monk either not attack those enemies or find a +5 weapon, like a +5 long sword or short sword that they can use as a backup item. They get a bonus to saving throws. They get a bonus to defend themselves against missile attacks. They get an inherent AC bonus, starting at AC 9 and then going up every other level. So they will end up the game with a really high AC. But then again, when you're talking about opponents that are using critical strike against you, or casting spells, or having a huge number of attacks, suddenly that really high AC is not going to make too much of an impact, especially against opponents that are getting critical hits that automatically are going to hit regardless. And when they hit, they're hitting with a full effect because you're not wearing a helmet. This is something that a monk needs to watch out for. They do get a couple of additional immunities. They get immunities to being slowed down, to diseases. They will eventually get immunity to being charmed, being held, to poison. They won't be able to be hastened, which kind of stinks, but eventually they'll be immune to non-magical weapons and they'll be immune. They'll get a really good magic resistance. At 14th level, they will start with 42% magic resistance. Oh boy, that's pretty hefty. So monks can be pretty good, particularly opponents who are magic users or casters, because they can actually shrug off a lot of the magical effects with maybe with the additional of like bonus of a potion or something like that to enhance their magical resistance. But like being almost immune to all magic is not too shabby. Their saving grace is going to be the stunning blow. Stunning blow will allow for a monk who is lucky enough to get a good hit in to basically protect themselves. They'll stun an opponent and get to wail on them as much as possible until the stunning wears off, which, you know, it might or might not before the monk is done beating them. Every hit against a stunned opponent is going to hit, and considering that monks are going to get a large number of attacks per round, this is actually a pretty good technique to just make sure that an opponent isn't hitting you back. So that benefits the monk to be able to allow for them to go into combat and to stun an opponent and to not have to worry about not wearing a helmet, not wearing any armor. So you can get that benefit. You have to hit though. You have to hit with the stunning blow, and you have to make sure that they don't save versus spell. They will have the ability to move a little bit faster than a normal character, but they can't be hastened, as I've already mentioned. As a final bit, they will have the ability to get an automatic death attack called the Quivering Palm, where they will hit an opponent, and that opponent will either have the chance to save versus spell, or they'll automatically die and doesn't get to be targeted. This is okay, but I feel like the number of opponents who will save against this is actually pretty high. So you get this at level 13. It's neat for a level or two, maybe 3, and maybe if you're lucky you'll be able to use it against normal Bobos in Throne of Ball, but that's about it. You're only getting this once per day as well, so that's going to be kind of limiting. The last thing that kind of impacts the monk is the fact that of all of the fighter classes, or the warrior classes, the classes that are expected to go into the front line and to hit their opponents and to be the front line of combat, they have the fewest HP. They have only 1d8 HP plus whatever their constitution bonus is going to be. That's going to be a big impact on their ability to be successful. So you want to have obviously a high enough constitution, high enough dexterity to get them make them survival, and of course high enough strength to make sure that they can hit hard. But you're not going to be able to stand up in the front line as well as a fighter can. Now, you can probably do a fair amount of damage, especially once you're at the point where you're doing 1d20 damage plus whatever your strength bonus is. It's not too shabby, but you're not going to be the tank. That's going to be a role for a different character, probably a fighter, or maybe a fighter mage, or maybe even a paladin. The monk is not going to be your dodge tank. And if you thought that it would be challenging enough to play it as a monk, you should see their kits. The first kit that you can try out is the Dark Moon Monk. These are evil monks. You have to be lawful evil in order to be them. You don't get the ability to lay on hands, which, by the way, monks can lay on hands just like a paladin can. And they don't get the ability to use Stunning Blow. Now, that's a huge problem for monks, right? Not being able to get Stunning Blow to lock opponents up so they don't hit you back, that's a major problem. That being said, Dark Moon monks get a few things that can trade off. First off, they can detect illusions, and they get plus 10 to detecting illusions. That's not bad. One other thing I forgot to mention about baseline monks is they can hide in shadows, so if you need to use stealth to get up to an opponent and then wail on them, you can do that. So it's another additional thing that a monk gets. There's a lot of little things that a monk gets all along the way, but I still think that they're a very, very challenging class to play. And I've always had, as much as fun as I've had as playing a monk, I've also had a lot of challenges, a lot of headaches as playing as a monk. So Dark Moon monks get the ability to detect illusions. They can use Frozen Fist, which gives them a little bit of cold damage to their fist when they hit. Okay, big deal. They do get a couple of different spells. First, they can cast Blindness right at level 1. That's pretty good. Blindness at level 1 is pretty good as an ability. Blindness in itself is a very good spell that allows for a character. It basically will lock an opponent up, because an opponent's not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to see where blows are coming from, so they have to stand still. When they stand still, then they're not attacking you. So at that point, you may want to have your monk armed with like a missile weapon, something like darts or slings, and hit them from afar. At 3rd level, they can cast Blur. It's a little bit of a bonus to avoiding missile damage, as well as enhancing their saves versus spells and whatnot. Okay, that's nice. Not amazing, but it's nice. Vampiric Touch once per day. It's a pretty good spell. Does scaling damage for monks right in close combat. They're already going to be in close combat. That's a good combo. Then finally, Mirror Image. Mirror Image is amazing, especially for fighters. It's a big reason why fighter mages can be really nice, because you toss on Mirror Image to a guy who's in the frontline combat, suddenly every other attack or so is not going to be hit. So it could hit, and it's not going to get hit because it's hitting an illusion. So that's pretty good. They are the evil monks, though. So, but they're not alignment locked. You're not required to be a goody. You're not required to be evil if you're a Dark Moon monk. Just like if you're a Sun Soul monk, which we'll look at in just a sec, you don't lose your monk abilities or your Sun Soul abilities because you happen to fall or anything like that. That's not like a paladin or a ranger where you would be a fallen monk, or I don't know, in the case of a Dark Moon monk, a risen monk. I don't know, failed Dark Moon monk. You don't lose any of that if you happen to be a goody two-shoes. So, this is mostly just flavoring. There are impacts for, I guess, there are impacts for certain spells, like protection from evil or something like that, but, you're not really going to be impacted that much because you happen to be forced to be lawful evil. Then we get to the Sun Soul Monk, and if you thought the Dark Moon Monk was really challenging to play, oh boy, Sun Soul Monks, they have an even more hard time. They are first off required to be lawful good, which, if you're gonna be like a class that is a goody two-shoes class that doesn't have the risk of falling, Sun Soul Monk is fine. Sun Soul Monk is fine, except for the fact that they don't get the ability to do Stunning Blow, which again is rough, and they don't get the ability to use Quivering Palm, which is also rough. What do they get? They get fire attacks, fire-based attacks. So they get Sun Soul Ray, which does 1d8 to fire damage, which is like a little fire blast that hits a single target. This is fun to use against the undead because it does additional damage to them, but really it's just not. I mean, maximum 5d8 damage. Okay, that's a nice little like pop right into the front of combat. That's about it. They can use Flaming Fists, which are just like Frosty Fists, except they're on fire, and they scale a little bit because they last a little bit longer. They do actually do considerably more damage than the Frozen Fists, so that's kind of nice. They can use Greater Sun, which acts like Fire Shield Red, and gives them 50% fire resistance. And if they get hit with any melee attacks, then the opponent will suffer 1d8 plus 2 fire damage. Okay, that's nice. I would rather take Mirror Image or a lot of other things compared to this. Next is Sun Soul Beam. They get this at 13th level. This is, by the way, making up for the fact they don't get Quivering Palm. What do they get? You make a melee attack using the monk's Thaco, or 3 to hit plus the undead, and struck creatures suffer 96 points of fire damage, a little bit more if you're undead, unless they save in half. In addition, all characters must save, except for the monk. All creatures except for the monk must save versus spell or be blinded for 2 hours. Okay, blind, good, nice. Here's the problem: it's fire damage. All of the Sun Soul Monk's abilities are fire damage. Fire damage is the most resisted elemental damage that is out there in the game. More creatures can resist fire damage than any other type of damage. that's a benefit that the Dark Moon Monk gets, is that not many opponents can resist cold, but a lot of opponents can resist fire damage. So unless you're fighting trolls, right, Sun Soul Monks are really going to have a rough time throughout the game because, yes, fire damage, there's lots of creatures that don't resist fire. Okay, great. You know what does resist fire? Pretty much any demon is going to resist fire. Pretty much any outsider is going to resist damage. Fire dragons are going to resist fire damage. Mages and druids put up resistances to fire all the time. So you're running into a lot of problems with the Sun Soul Monk because they're going to be resistant to all of those fun abilities that they get in addition to being a monk. So when you look objectively at the Sun Soul Monk, I think, objectively speaking, if you were to look at all of the classes throughout all of the game, the Sun Soul Monk is the most challenging class to play because you have the most restrictions on your weapons, your items usage, that actually have an impact on your role in combat. And the type of damage that you specialize in, aside from the blunt damage, which, to be fair, blunt damage, the fact that monks get blunt damage is really good. But aside from that, blunt damage, they have fire damage, which is the most easily resisted type of damage in the game. So I think a Sun Soul Monk is a class that you can play. You can make them work, but they are the most challenging class to play in the game. As for a normal monk, they're gonna get quite a number of little abilities here and there. I think I've said it, that they can be fun to play. It's just you are in for a challenge if you play as them. You are not going to be doing the normal things that a warrior does of going up to the front line and hitting consistently. Although I will say their damage does scale nicely, and getting a large number of attacks is pretty nice. And the fact that it's all bludgeoning is also really good. And yes, they do count as magical weapons. Okay, that's really cool. That being said, the fact that they are not immune to critical hit damage is devastating. It will be devastating by the end of Baldur's Gate 1. It'll be devastating throughout all of Baldur's Gate 2 and Throne of Ball. It is just so rough. And that's why monks are very, very difficult to play, unless, of course, you were to mod them. Which leads me to the Artisan's Kitpack version of the monk, which is downloadable. I put the link in the description below. It's a typical WeDo mod. You basically let the program run, and it replaces the original files that are in there as the monk. Now, it has a lot of the same things, right? You can't use armor. You can't use helmets. That is all true. In addition, you have a different scaling for the damage. It doesn't scale up as high. You don't do 1d20. At level 15, you do 2d8. So you're doing a little less damage. However, you do get a couple things that make up for it. First off, you get the ability to use Flurry of Blows, which allows for you to sacrifice a little bit of THAC0 to do an extra damage per extra attack per round. That's kind of nice. In addition, you can use it while also using daggers. So if you're stuck at levels 1 and 2 and you're doing only 1d4 damage, if you want to use a dagger and you are attacking with daggers, then you can turn on Flurry of Blows and have that as a possible ability. They also get the enchantment to their fist damage earlier on, and by level 20 they are at +5. That's really good. They also get their AC bonus also correlates with their wisdom, which gets more to the base rules of what it's supposed to be, right? A monk is supposed to benefit not just from a high dexterity, which is part of their physical stat, but also from a high wisdom. That's the way 5th edition plays it, and that's the way just about every other edition has played the monk, is that they are supposed to be a warrior that also incorporates wisdom, because wisdom is seen as a very perception-based ability. So that's pretty cool. They get the same Stunning Fist. They get a bunch of other additional abilities and resistances. They get Quivering Palm. They can also get Empty Body, which allows for them to get partial invisibility and gives them a bonus towards saving throws. And it can't be targeted through spells. That's pretty good. Here's the amazing thing. At level 15, they get Inner Eye. The monk becomes immune to critical hits while unarmed. At that point, you should not be using weapons. Don't use weapons. Go unarmed. Seriously, unless you're doing ranged and you're hucking darts or whatever, right? Go unarmed, because being immune to critical hits, chef's kiss. That makes this, when I saw this, I knew I had to download this. I absolutely knew I had to download this. Not only that, but of course they also get the ability at 20th level to be immune to all these things. Normally comes a little bit earlier for some, but imprisonment, being immune to imprisonment and psionics, wow. Whew. That's pretty good. And, immune to weapons of +1 enchantment and below. All of that is really good. I strongly encourage you, if you are interested in playing as the monk, get this mod. It has trade-offs. You're not going to be doing as much damage, at least not as early, right? In fact, with this, technically, you're only doing 1d4 damage when you start the game with your fists. At that point, I would maybe pick up a sword or pick up a sling. Slings are pretty good weapons to use if you're a monk early on in the game. But you are going to be so much better protected against a whole bunch of stuff. Let's see, not only that, but I think I saw something here that said, oh yes, Quivering Palm. So something else to note is that they save versus death, and -1 to the modifier for every point of wisdom above 16. You could end Baldur's Gate 1 with a wisdom of 19, and then advance it even further beyond that in Baldur's Gate 2 and Throne of Ball. This is so good. So it's just absolutely phenomenal, giving you a very nice AC, giving you a very nice ability to do some damage against your opponents. I just think this mod is so much better than the base mod, than the base version of the monk. So rather than do a really deep dive into the differences made between this modded version and these kits, including the brawler, I strongly recommend that you check out this kit. You check out this download. The brawler is kind of cool, by the way. They get resistances, and it's meant to be basically a chunkier, thicker version of the monk. They still are gonna. It looks like they get their Inner Eye, which is really kind of cool, but they don't. They can be any alignment, but they don't get special key powers or anything like that. They basically are a guy who's like just a guy who punches up in the front row. But a monk, just significantly better with this mod. I strongly recommend you check it out, download it. Artisan's Kitpack. It's in the description below. Please, please, please do yourself a favor and check that out. So for alignment, a monk has to be any form of lawful. The logic behind this is that they follow whatever rules of conduct that they need to need to follow as a philosophy or as whatever ideology that they have. If you're a Dark Moon monk, you're going to be restricted to lawful evil. If you're a Sun Soul monk, you're restricted to lawful good. To me, this makes sense, right? If you've ever done any martial arts, you know that there are rules that you have to follow in competitions, or rules that you have to follow with the forms that you do, or one-step sparring or sparring. There's only places where you can hit, and there's certain codes of philosophy that you have to enact when you are when you're conducting these martial arts, when you're living in these martial arts styles. So just keep that in mind whenever you're playing. This has a good reason. So for ability scores, you're going to focus on the physical stats. Strength will help out enhance your damage, Dexterity will give you AC bonuses, and Constitution will give you survivability. Then you have any remaining points, if you're using the modded version, should go into Wisdom. That's the clearest and easiest thing you do. In fact, at this point, you want to bring wisdom all the way up to 18. Sacrifice charisma if you need to. I wouldn't sacrifice intelligence, just because if you're fighting against mind flayers, if you have an intelligence of 11, like this character would have if I went through Baldur's Gate 1, then you would survive 3 hits instead of just 2. So, you know, intelligence of 11 is fine for this character, but wisdom, tossing that, making sure that by the end of Baldur's Gate 1, if you have 21 wisdom, oh boy, you're gonna have a good day, especially because a lot of their special abilities you're gonna get minus. They're gonna be easier to land if you have a higher wisdom, and your AC bonus will be improved greatly as well. So pop wisdom, make sure that's as high as possible. It is, however, a little less important than the physical scores, and the physical scores, I would say, are really, really important, especially if you're playing as with the unmodified version of the monk. Just bring up these physical scores as much as possible. So for weapon proficiencies, you're going to be able to use any thief-based weapon that is not two-handed. It means long swords, short swords, katanas, scimitars, daggers, clubs, darts, and slings. They get 2 points. They can only be proficient in them. They cannot specialize in them. This, I think, is a little bit of an undersight, although the main focus of the monk is to be using their fists. In addition, they get the ability to be in stealth, to either hide in shadows or to move silently. I would say prioritize hide in shadows. That way that you're going to be able to initially hide and then move around as need be until you realize that your move silently failed. Then you have 2 rounds to get to a safe place and try it again. You also get the ability to find traps. You cannot, you can't actually disarm traps. You can't disarm traps. You're just finding them. That seems really stupid. But that's what they decided. If you play as the Dark Moon monk, then you can also detect illusions. It's not a bad ability. In fact, I would say detect illusions is probably a really big deal, especially if you're playing at, if you're in Throne of Ball and having your monk maybe hiding in shadows and walking around detecting illusions and uncovering when that mage chooses mirror image. That's pretty good. So a monk having the abilities that they get, they are not going to be your main frontline fighter. They are going to be more likely to be a good damage dealer, and they have to be very careful about how to use their abilities. Stunning Fist is a lifesaver for a lot of these monks, and also the magic resistance and immunities are pretty good, but losing the ability, if you're playing as the unmodified monk, losing the ability to shrug off critical hits because you're not wearing a helmet is a big deal. However, that's why I strongly recommend getting that modded version. Now, one final note with the modded version is keep in mind that ability of the inner eye, that comes in at level 15. That's very late. It's very, very late in the game. So you're still going to want to keep your monk at a distance unless you know that other people are going to soak up fire. Then you can go in and start beating with opponents. If you are interested in checking out how the modified monk works, I strongly recommend you check out the video I have down below that takes a look at a run I ran with Matthias, the monk, using this modified monk. I was really, really impressed with how much his abilities were, although it still had a bit of challenge. I think I went through, it was a reincarnation run. I think I went through 3 reincarnations, mostly because I was playing as an idiot and I didn't know what I was doing. But I think that it was fun to play. So I strongly recommend you watch the video and give the monk a try. Whether you're playing as the modded version or the unmodded version, do the modded version. Then you'll be in for a unique treat. And thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, take care and good luck. We're all counting on you.